slowly get us started is kind of figuring out how to not eat the mic or get it too far away here. But as we get started this morning, the message this morning for our study time here, it is a Bible study hour, and so I hope you have some good dividers for your word. A digital copy that you can text and reference real quick will be handy as we use Isaiah 4 as really the springboard for the Advent promised. But as we get into it and people are kind of getting situated, I want you to kind of think about your Christmas traditions. Our home is in Christmas preparation mode. And historically, I was thinking about those things which we did as kids and then transitioned into the married life that we've done with our kids. And then now in this season, as we've put up a tree and done those things. I'm sure you have a lot of traditions in your own families and in your own lives. One thing that struck me over and over and over as I dug into this more and more and more was where maybe my traditions, my cultural upbringing, my own experiences were a bit lacking in an Advent season, a season that is designed to prepare us for something greater than a Christmas tree and presents that morning. So my upbringing was a pretty 90s typical, go to a couple churches, watch some Cabbage Patch Babies in a manger, maybe some live animals that did some weird things on stage, just the kind of the performance-y thing on a Sunday. And we knew all about, Dasher and Prancer and some weird reindeer with glowing noses, but not Advent. And what Advent really was in the life of the believer, or why it is such an important piece of church history. So, in case you're like me and maybe didn't have such a robust Advent understanding, Advent, there's many exceptions, many changes, many variations throughout church history. It has never been any one strict liturgical thing. However, it has been a strict liturgical thing in another way, in that it's always been a season. Historically, about 4 weeks, some other traditions, maybe 40, 41 days for some of our other traditions. But in that time, the 4 weeks prior to Christmas Day has always been recognized as the Advent season. But I got to thinking about why weeks before Advent, or the Advent on Christmas morning. And it's all about that anticipation. It's all about that preparation for that moment, that glorious moment. There's many different things that church traditions would do, that they would celebrate, that they would encourage. But ultimately, the church throughout this season has been in a preparatory season. It's the beginning of actually a liturgical new year that drives through Lent and then beyond. But it's that beginning stage of anticipation. So that's why we have an Advent, and that was kind of what was missing in some of my old cultural upbringings. One author pointed this out, and this will be kind of that springboard, which will then start to dive us into the word. The word Advent is simply, it just means coming. That's the most basic understanding that you can have of the word Advent, not the formalized season. And that is the springboard, because in that coming, one author puts it this way: what is often neglected is the Advent celebrations also looked to the future. The term Advent translates to the Greek parousia, a word that in the New Testament always speaks of the Messiah's second coming. And so Advent is not just a season where we look back to a day. That day springs us with an assurance of a future hope. And so yes, we look back with joy, and Advent at this time is a season of anticipation and preparation, and that is the very reason I want us to dive into Isaiah 4 this morning, as we are in a season of anticipation, a season of hope for what has been promised, and then now looking back with renewed eyes of the sure promises through the incarnation of Christ that morning. So before I dive into our text, I think that's enough preparatory words. I'll go ahead and pray and dive into Isaiah 4, beginning in verse 2, actually. So join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you with low and a humbled heart by the study of your word. I ask that for all those here prepared, that you have prepared, that we have also prepared our hearts to hear your word, that we come here with an expectation to know you, that your word would be delivered, and that your word would grow us, and that we would ultimately behold your word and see its glory. And this very simple desire be prayed through Christ Jesus, our sure hope. Amen. Let me go ahead and begin in Isaiah 4, verse 2. And I'm going to be reading out of a CSB translation, not an ESV translation. The primary factor being, that's what I brought this morning. And also, we'll get into some other reasons, but that's just what I have my notes in this morning. So beginning in verse 2. On that day, the branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land will be the pride and glory of Israel's survivors. Whoever remains in Zion and whoever is left in Jerusalem will be called holy. All in Jerusalem, written in the book of life. When the Lord has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and cleansed the blood guilt from the heart of Jerusalem by a spirit of judgment and a spirit of burning, then the Lord will create a cloud of smoke by day and a glowing flame of fire by night over the entire site of Mount Zion and over its assemblies. For there will be a canopy over all the glory, and there will be a shelter for shade from heat by day and a refuge and shelter from storm and rain. And then, of course, chapter 5 gets into that Song of the Vineyard. I will sing about the one I love, a song about my loved one's vineyard. So we'll pause reading, although we could keep reading well beyond here for context's sake. I just wanted to go ahead and break today's message up into really 3 different parts. One is on that day, or in that day, the branch of the Lord, and will be beautiful and glorious. That'll be kind of our 3 little groups as we walk through verse 2 specifically, and I hope to enlarge that in our hearts by the context that it's in. And the first thing up front is that in that day, or on that day, as you start to interact with that, you might kind of get confused by it. It might become a little bit more of a difficult passage because you want to know what day, right? Like, yes, you kind of have this, like, you have your formulated idea about your future eschatology, you know, the priest, the post, the dispute, whatever it is, and then you insert that here. But I want to kind of level set this, and although it's going to be there, it's there for me as I engage with this passage. I want us to do our best to engage with Isaiah and what he is saying in that day. If you go to dive into this later on, and I hope you do, that will flood your commentaries. And I just simply want to caution us on that. We want to see the beauty of the forest, not just some little trees sprinkled in. So, what day? Is it literal day? Is it a figurative day? Is it a past day, a present day, a future day? Well, let me go ahead and shed some light on it, because that's, I suppose, what I'm here to do. That day is that day. Simply that. I'm not going to break it down any more than that. It's that day. It is a time of which Isaiah is speaking to the people, the covenanted people of the Lord. And he says, on that day, or in that day. It does carry a future sense to it, though. So we can conclude that he's not talking about tomorrow, or is he saying, today you will see. But we can see on that day, as in a forward-looking glance. But sometimes that term can get a little bit misleading, that on that day, in that day. Isaiah uses the term 40 times in his message, and it doesn't always mean the same that day is speaking of in verse 2. And to see that, I want us to back up one single verse to verse 1. And as I do, I'll just introduce a little bit of a hardship, because as you read verse 1, by yourselves right now, you're wondering, how on earth is this going to be an Advent message? In fact, me and Maddie have been kind of in a very stressful season, and I'm working out of town a lot, and so we get a lot of texts back and forth. I can't always answer my phone, and one particular time we're texting back and forth, and she asked, like, what are you even going to be teaching on amidst all these other things of life we have going on? And I was like, oh, Isaiah 4. That's when the texts stop for about 5 minutes, and I can only assume that she was like, Isaiah 4. I don't know that one by heart. It's not Isaiah 53 in the suffering servant, Isaiah 4. I can only assume, I did not confirm, but that there was a reading of Isaiah 4 and what in the world does this have to do with Advent? For on that day, 7 women will seize one man, saying, we will eat our own bread and provide our own clothing. Just let us bear your name. Take away our disgrace. Maybe not the fluffy Advent message you were hoping for. Maybe not what you really were like, oh yeah, Advent, we're going to see babies in a manger. That's the way that I grew up. Just let us bear your name and take away our disgrace. It's pretty pronounced in the CSB, the NASB, the KJV and KGV, a lot of other translations, that in that day actually leads the phrase there in verse 1. So it's kind of an easy connection to make. You're meant to see on that day in a very particular way, just like you do in verse 18. In chapter 3, verse 18, that is, on that day, when the Lord will strip their finery. Well, that's really not any more hopeful. That's all the preparatory stuff for that day in verse 1. Lowering, and then verse 2. On that day, we'll call that the juxtaposition. I love that word. It's like, one of those words you learn in school kind of thing, and it just sticks with me. I love the word juxtaposition. So if I can, it's more than 2 syllables, and I'm going to use it. Notice the juxtaposition. Notice that difference between verse 1's day and verse 2's day. They're used differently. They do mean something different, but at the same time, they convey the same future-looking sight picture on that day, which may or may not be now, but on that day, lowering, take away our disgrace, remove our reproach. 7 women will seize to one man. What is that signifying? What is that really portraying? It is a very real, true, marked desolation. And that is not the Christmas message you came for this morning. That's why I keep stressing that. But God, we'll get there. But right now, on that day, desolation. An abandonment, a loneliness, a misery, a devastation, a ruin. These are just some synonymous terms. The descriptor is being in that state of forsakenness and abandonment. And yet on the next day, in verse 2, a beautiful and glorious branch of Yahweh, the Lord, whose fruit will be glorious. So I hope that makes sense. But I do want to stress, because I can't go forward just yet, I got to stress the context of the day that is promised before the day we long for. The day promised begins, I'll just highlight it in verse 25 of chapter 3, so we're just slowly squeaking backwards even. Your men will fall by the sword, your warriors in battle, her gates will lament and mourn. Deserted, she will sit on the ground. That's the CSB translation. I know the ESV is slightly different. Carrying the 100% equivalent translation and meaning. Desolation. Promised, assured by the hand of the Lord. It is coming. Why? Why? How can such terrible things happen to the people of God? Well, let us keep reading. I want to, before breaking out into that next chapter 2, let's put it in a very real sense. The reality of history is not exempt from a future illustration of things to come, or the vineyard. That's in chapter 5. Isaiah 4:2 wasn't selected as a focal point in order to shame today's Israel, 1,000 years ago's Israel. If that's what you're thinking, recognize your heart is no different than their heart then, before the promise of future hope. That is our starting point. We just have a different, more assured promise. The same promise, not different promise. The same promise, just more sure. We are shored up on the things that have seen. And yet, to that remnant of Israel who pleads for the reproach to be taken away, who are the kings in the time of Isaiah? Have you thought about that? What was the day? What was that day? Notice the past tense use of it. What was that day like of Isaiah? There was 4 primary kings, Uzziah or Azariah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. You can read Isaiah 1, you can read Kings and Chronicles. Here's the quick summary. King Uzziah, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. But he did not tear down high places, and people kept sacrificing to foreign gods. A covenanted people of God who do not sacrifice appropriately to their God. They're adulterers in that sense. Covenanted adulterers. Jotham did do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but did not tear down the high places, and the people kept sacrificing to foreign gods. Okay, that's the first 2 kings in Israel's day, that day of Isaiah. Covenant abandonment's already taken place, and though maybe a king is doing some kingly things before the Lord, the people are not. The people's heart are towards other gods. And then you get Ahaz. Who knows about Ahaz? Yeah, this is going to be awesome then. Ahaz did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. What did Ahaz do? Maybe that's more pronounced than other things. He sacrificed his own child to a foreign god. A covenant king of the people of God sacrifices his own son to a foreign idol. This is the people that are being pronounced desolation to. You can ask yourself, is it just? You can try to rationalize it. God has set these people aside to be something they are not. The covenant if in Exodus, they are not the if on the good side. They are not upholding what they were intended and said, we will uphold. Their kings aren't doing it. Hezekiah, after Ahaz, a little bit unique. He does again do what is right in the eyes of the Lord. But he also takes down the Asherah poles. He tears down the high places. He even destroys the gold serpent that was in Numbers 21. I don't know if you guys remember this story, but the people of Israel, they were dying, being bitten by serpents. Look up at the serpent rays, they would look to it and live. Well, then they start worshiping the golden idol. And Hezekiah destroys it. Huge theological significance in the golden serpent, and yet we don't worship the golden statue. We worship the God who saves. And what happens in Hezekiah's day, though he destroys this, though he tears down all the poles, though he's renewing that relationship, destruction is promised to him by Isaiah. It's to him, not Ahaz. It's to him that the final word of sure desolation, when, after the Babylonians come and Hezekiah's pride is in the things of Israel, he has shown the Babylonians all that they possess. You can argue about what those entire things were. Read Isaiah 39, Kings, Chronicles. I like that Isaiah 39 happens to be that really hard part for academics to separate between Isaiah 40 and that's a beautiful thing to me. It's right in the middle of Isaiah, and it propels people to see the prophecies therein of their day. So, not the fluffy message again. Let's go ahead and enter Advent then. The Advent being promised in verse 2. I can go on and stress more of the doom and gloom. I just don't have the time. That's really what it comes down to. So in verse 2, that springboard that I began us with, there is a reason I began us in verse 2 and not verse 1, and that's so you can see the glory that is here. For on that day, the branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious. Doom and gloom. And on that other day, the branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious. So let's take a look at this branch of the Lord. First, interpretive things. Branch of the Lord. Many people here will have an ESV translation, and it'll be a lowercase b branch, right? I'm using a CSB, it's a capital B branch. The NASB, capital B branch. NLT, a lowercase b branch. So let's address that aspect of the branch of the Lord. There is an academic debate because the original Hebrew didn't have a capital B or a lowercase b, just didn't have a B. It had Hebrew lines that we then translate and sure up in translation. So in its sense, or in its way, there are two main camps, right? The lowercase b and the capital B. You can have a lowercase b branch, still mean capital B branch implications, but that's just the translative side. But in its implications, some people would say that this lowercase b just refers to the people of Israel, right? Or that it, what's the right word I'm looking for? That it represents the land. And they would go through some different little principles there about the verse following it, referring to some land. Therefore, the branch being that same illustration can also mean the land. And they would kind of like do this like kind of floating wiggle thing where they impose something else on it. But that's not really the context that we're seeing. What we're seeing is a separation between a people and a branch. That's the context. In fact, the doubling down on this is that desolation is represented by a barrenness. Chapter 5's vineyard is about their sure destruction, their wild fruit-producing destruction. There will be no fruit. There will be nothing from them to produce glory. Their seed has ended. That's one way to look at that. But in this sense, those lowercase b groups would say that this branch or sprout maybe is a figure to the remnant Jewish people that return after a Babylonian exile. Or after, if they don't want to be that specific about a Babylonian exile, they would say after a period of judgment, the return of Israel. There's a couple different ways you can look at that there. But where I have intentionally left some little like ambiguity about the phrase in that day, I do not want to leave any ambiguity in the capital B branch of the Lord promised here. The Advent being promised here. And so context, immediate context itself might be enough to sway. I want to look at maybe the greater context. But before I do, let me go ahead and say there's a lot of things that people might think that I am saying that I'm not. I am not saying that the capital B branch of the Lord does not come through Israel. I'm not saying that God does not have a purpose for Israel in a future sense, in a current sense, in a past sense. I am simply trying to highlight the fact that we are looking at a capital B branch promised. So of this capital B branch, I want to go ahead and look at some wider context. That by the prophets of different days, for in other days, future days, through other prophets. Because this same phrase is used in a couple different ways, but specifically the phrase is used by two other prophets, Jeremiah and Zechariah. And both of them happen to be in different days. In one day, Isaiah. In another day, Jeremiah. In another day, Zechariah. And then still in yet another day, the Gospels are about to be seen. So in Isaiah's day, looking forward, here is Jeremiah. Let's go ahead and turn there. Jeremiah 23. So Isaiah's days were up and down, people doing things right in the eyes of the Lord, a complete and total abandonment, a renewal, a kind of a swaying. If you know anything about Jeremiah's days, there was nothing to be, there was no room for that joy to really propagate through. Destruction by the Assyrians, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, and for those that aren't sure, think Lamentations. Okay? And yet in Jeremiah's day, as I still have not flipped there, in Jeremiah's day, chapter 23, 5 and 6, we hear his own words about the branch of the Lord. 23, verses 5 and 6. Look, the days are coming. This is the Lord's declaration. When I will raise up a righteous branch for David, he will reign wisely as king and administer justice and righteousness in the land. In his days, Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell securely. This is the name he will be called. The Lord is our righteousness. Isaiah's day, looking forward. Jeremiah's day, looking back at sure promise, conveying the Lord's decree, still looking forward to further promise, a singular descendant, a righteous branch. His name will be, the Lord is our righteousness. Okay? That's an evidence. Jeremiah uses the same phrase yet again in chapter 33. So just flip there real quick. Chapter 33, verses 14 and 15. In verse 14, we read, "Look, the days are coming. This is the Lord's declaration when I will fulfill the good promise that I have spoken concerning the house of Israel and the house of Judah. In those days and at that time, I will cause a righteous branch to sprout up for David, and he will administer justice and righteousness in the land." A promise to be fulfilled. A promise made and fulfilled. 2 houses, single righteous branch, and his name will again be, the Lord is our righteousness. 1 man, 7 women in their day will cling to one man, saying to take away our reproach. Their forward looking is for a man to take away their reproach. I can get way more illustrative than that, but their hope in a very real sense is their barrenness and inability to produce godly fruit, and yet here we have it, a sure promise of a righteous branch coming that they will cling to. In covenant relationship, there's the illustrative parallel promised. But now, turning from Jeremiah, and Jeremiah's day, I can't stress it enough, exile was before them. Desolation was before them as children and moms and men are slain and people are being eaten. Everything spread out before them is surely happening, and that is the sure promise of that day. Zechariah, on the other hand, you can go ahead and turn there, and I'm just going to listen for the little flips for a while because I'm not sure how often people turn to Zechariah. It's probably easiest to go Matthew, back a little bit, Malachi, back a little bit, Zechariah. But Zechariah is another contemporary of Isaiah and Jeremiah. pre, current, post, exile. Zechariah's day was one of exile. Zechariah's day knew Babylonian captivity, and they witnessed the return of exiles, an attempt to rebuild the temple. That's Zechariah's day. Zechariah's day is filled with Zechariah is in a different day than Jeremiah and Isaiah, and yet he has a forward-looking and current-looking promise. Couple interpretive notes on Zechariah. A, it is not the same kind of prophetic book as Isaiah or Jeremiah. It's probably closer, if you want to get into like some little like interpretive hermeneutical things, more closely related to Daniel than it is Isaiah, or even John's Revelation than it is an epistle in that same way. It is very illustrative. It is visionary. In fact, if you're in Zechariah and you start flipping around, you'll see 1 vision, 2 visions, 3 visions, 4 visions, vision, 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 vision. And we interpret visions a little bit differently than we would a historical account. So one little commentator, if I can find it in my notes here, puts it like this, because it's important to note. When we read a passage in Zechariah, when we read a passage, we see only what is happening in that snapshot. Okay? Glimpse. You don't see the whole picture. Glimpse. We see what is only happening in that snapshot. We do not see how it relates to other snapshots. That's not as clear here. Zechariah's visions combine present realities and future realities in an interwoven fabric. That's one commentator's like overview of just, hey, when you get into Zechariah, it's visionary. Don't be weirded out by it. It's also still canon. And how can we be sure of that? Because the Gospels quote it extensively. Like over and over and over and over and over. Zechariah chapter 3, if you afford me the opportunity to talk to or get to where I'm talking about. Zechariah chapter 3, verse 8. Fourth vision, high priest and a branch. Listen, high priest Joshua, you and your colleagues sitting before you, indeed these men are a sign that I'm about to bring my servant, the branch. Remember, I'm bringing out this context to highlight something else about Isaiah 4:2, and that case that this is a capital B branch. The branch here, the servant. From that day to that day to that day, looking forward to the servant branch. But more, in Zechariah, we have a high priestly imagery. Zechariah, Jeremiah, Isaiah have what? An Advent hope, and are talking about this sure hope that God has promised he will do, regardless of their circumstance, regardless of their day, regardless of their dispensation, regardless of this. God has surely promised this. There's more in Zechariah, though. Zechariah 6 quotes the same phrase, the same term, the same Hebrew root. Zechariah 6:12. This one will actually put me into a little bit of an interpretive state, one that I did not have like the years to dedicate, but 6:12 gives us a kingly image, a branch who builds the temple of the Lord. 6 verse 12. You are to tell him, this is what the Lord of armies says. Here is a man whose name is Branch. He will branch out from his place and build the Lord's temple. Yes, he will build the Lord's temple. He will bear royal splendor. These are just some drawings in the way that I wanted to really gravitate attention towards. In their day, they have a kingly hope, a priestly hope, a servant hope of a branch who will spring forth and propagate what? Beauty and glory. And what are those attributes? They're not just things. He's not producing pomegranates and watermelon. I don't know if watermelon even grows out there, but just he's not producing actual cucumbers. And the fields aren't ripe with corn. It's this branch is producing beauty and glory. What is beauty? What is glory? Who possesses glory? I will take us back now to Isaiah 4 in that context, because there is a beautiful and glorious thing to see here. They're very hard things that we understand them conceptually, but it's harder for me because I'm a little bit more literal. I'm not like the musician, artist. Like, I don't see things in different ways. Like, I don't know, it says beauty. And then I get into it. I'm just kind of that way about it. So let me try and do my best to convey beauty and glory as innate attributes derived from a God. Beauty and glory in chapter 3. Verses, 18. On that day, the Lord will strip their finery. Ankle bracelets. They can be a beautification. In fact, all of these are about to be, that you're about to see, that you're probably reading and surveying, are beautifications. They're intended to make one beautiful. Ankle bracelets, headbands, crescents, pendants, bracelets, veils, headdresses, ankle jewelry, sashes, perfume bottles, amulets, signet rings, nose rings, festive robes, capes, cloaks, purses, garments, linen cloths, turbans, and shawls, perfumes, styled hair, fine clothes. Instead of beauty, branding. In verse 24. Then your men will fall by the sword. What is all this conveying? None of those things make Israel beautiful. We've got modern illustrations for this, right? Like, you can put lipstick on a pig, I think is like a common expression of this. It's still a pig. It's still rolling in the mud. It could be the whitewashed tomb. Like we've got all kinds of examples. None of these things make Israel beautiful. In fact, what does the Lord say? These things are evidences against their beauty. These are evidences of their abandonment to the Lord, of their haughtiness, of their pride, of their sure destruction. These are removed because they are not beautiful. And that's not because God doesn't have an eye, so to speak, for beauty. Think back to Exodus. And when he was telling them all the beautiful arrangements for the tabernacle, all of the decor, the craftsman's hands are beautiful. In Isaiah, you know what's beautiful? The feet of him who brings good news. And that's before Isaiah 53, suffering sermon. That's before he had no beauty that we would look upon him. There's a different kind of beauty that's being looked at and talked about in verse 2. The beauty and glory of the Lord, of the Lord's branch. He will be the radiance of glory. True beauty, true glory, not like Israel has produced. They were to produce beauty and glory, but didn't. They abandoned beauty and glory to chase after lesser things. And our hearts are no different. This isn't against them, although it was absolutely there. But to make that real for us, we're not that much better. Our hearts desire lesser things, lesser beauties. We are fixated upon shiny things, and they do not make us beautiful. the Lord's branch is beautiful. And in this promise, he is surely going to be beautiful amidst all things. I guess another way to put this, fairly difficult aspect, which I hope is not really that difficult to understand. Who does God ever share his glory with? That's like we understand conceptually glory, but who does God share his glory with? Google search it. I love the Blue Letter Bible as just like a resource because it helps me quickly reference things. Here's a fun exercise to do in your home time. Shares glory, and then that little asterisk thing, so it'll pull up everything with shares and glory, not just what you put in there. Does not. I will not share my glory. The kings were supposed to be finding their glory in the Lord, and what did they do? They sacrificed things to other gods. There was no glory. They did not behold glory. Their glory was not derived through his glory. They were inglorious. They lacked glory. This branch, somehow, some way, when God does not share his glory, will be glorious. Hezekiah's glory was his possessions, the abundant riches and wealth that God had temporarily given to Israel. The Lord gives and takes away, and yet that was where he boasted to the Babylonians. Glory is not found in your possessions of things, your wealth, your house, your home, your whatever, your car. This beauty, this glory is an innate attribute of the Lord. This beauty is of the branch, the capital B branch. And this is the Advent promise. The capital B branch is going to be beautiful and glorious. Though for this time, for this season, what will come before will be barrenness. And as I'm trying to wrap this up, looking at the time, I hope to have shored up maybe a thought on one particular thing, and that alone is that throughout any day, Isaiah's, Jeremiah's, Zechariah's, looking forward was always an aspect of the Advent. And it's no different for the Christian hope today. Their forward looking is what made me think about what I look forward to for on that day. But before Steve gets there during his sermon, I want to think about how the gospel writers spoke of Christ on their day, or in their day, on that day. And to do so, I thought it was beautiful to look at Luke. I've been in Luke and Isaiah pretty consistently, just as a personal affection of mine. And the first thing you find in Luke chapter 1, verse 25, specifically, remember Luke is basically putting forth a historical apologetic so that we will know and have sure comfort. And so he's building a case for Christ as the branch. And what does Elizabeth proclaim in verse 25? The Lord has done this for me. He has looked with favor in these days to take away my disgrace among the people, a seed. Do you hear that echo? What the Lord had not done, what the Lord had taken away, what the Lord had removed, what the Lord was telling his people to look forward to. Elizabeth is now with joy celebrating in what man? Not her son, sorry. The Lord has taken away her reproach. Her son was John the Baptist, and all of the synoptics talk about him being the forebearer to Christ. In fact, they quote Isaiah 40, the one crying in the wilderness, bringing forth, ushering in the seed. And then that's the first quote that Luke's beautiful gospel shares of Isaiah before Mary says, before the angel says, before the shepherds, before the angel, before everybody. That's actually before Anna in chapter 2 speaks to all those who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. That's the text in Luke. The echo, the cry, the one in the wilderness, like growing into what? People speaking about the remnant who's looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem through the branch. That's just chapters 1 and 2 of Luke, by the way. That's like just the first two chapters. Time's running quick, so let me be as quick as Mark. Mark's gospel opens up very different pace. He says in verse 1, right out the gate, this is the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Doesn't have the same anticipatory buildup. The absolute sure conclusion, this is the branch, the one whom all of our aspirations have looked forward to. He's here. That's what we look forward to on Christmas. That's why there's this anticipatory season of Advent leading up to that day, and it doesn't stop there. Maybe our tradition makes us exhausted by December 26th, but that's not Advent. Advent is an anticipatory season of which we rejoice in the coming of the Lord. But I think the best way to really close out this time is by John. Surely you've already heard me say it because I couldn't hold it back. John 1, John's testimony. People in different traditions, in different ways have quoted from this and argued for, no, John's gospel is an actual, no. Like John, the Apostle John, the one who wrote Revelation and looked to things yet unseen, things that have not happened in his day, is here at a crossroads pointing back to what? In John 1, verses 9 to 14. I'll read them in closing. John 1, starting in verse 9. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world, a future moment. He was in the world, and the world was created through him, and yet the world did not recognize him. He came to his own. Now, looking back. And his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, he gave them the right to be children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of natural descent, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And then, verse 14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Advent promised has come. We observed his glory. The glory as the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him and exclaimed that this was the one of whom I said, the one coming after me ranks ahead of me because he existed before me. If you are here and you have tasted and seen Christ, you have seen his glory. And that's the hope that we have as we look forward. So I'll close with John's words. Let me pray. Oh, gracious Lord, I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come here and partake of your word, that you would instill in us a sure hope amidst sure chaos, that regardless of circumstance or situation or anything in between today for us here, those distractions and lesser things that we hold and cling to, remove them, Lord. Let us know what it is to behold his glory, true glory of true glory. Lord, I pray this as this upcoming time here would be profitable, that Steve's words would be able to penetrate our stiff-necked hearts. Lord, break in us a renewed hope, built upon the promises you have made, and let us see him in his beauty, in his glory. And these things I pray through the precious blood of Christ. Amen.